Oh, Jake, your newest video, from someone who's very pokey positive, such as yourself, to someone who's newly found pokey positive, such as myself. It just confuses me what your new video is all about. Twice Baked Jake, the best content creator ever when it comes to talking about Pokemon opinions and investments and what you should do, what money you should sink stuff into. He's one of the best. He's the best, most pokey positive person I think we have when it comes to that niche of marketing and Pokemon level of expertise. However, his recent video has very much got me scratching my head a little bit, very much got my balls a little itchy. I don't really know what to think about what he has to say because it's a video that actively contradicts itself a couple of times. In fundamentals, the foundation of the video and what's actually being spouted, I don't necessarily think Twice Baked Jake means it that way. I think he has his ways. Who are we to question is the pokey positive community, right? However, I do want to go over a couple of the things that he said and just point out a couple things about the inconsistencies possibly with it, where it's like it's in the same video and it's in concept versus what's being said. It's just such a stark comparison that I don't think anybody who's watching it and sees it, and I don't think you'll be able to ignore it past that point. So without further ado, let's watch a little bit of Twice Bakey Jakey video. Will be in the description below, and let's just have some fun, shall we? Pokey positive fun.
What's up, everybody? Jake here, and welcome to the hobby. What I've noticed when it comes to collecting is that a little bit of information can go a really long way, and I'm going to share some tips today that is actually kind of unspoken. These are things that other collectors don't really want you to know about.
Are these things that like every collector should know about, or is this something that no collector wants anybody to know about? See, it starts there, and where it starts to build up. This is absolutely nothing, but this kind of sets the tone for something. It's all these, top 5 tips that collectors don't want you to know about as a new person in Pokemon. Top 5 things that'll make you go, what? It's that kind of stuff, while actively immediately next saying this is something that every collector should know. It's kind of a weird statement to start out with. It's not really anything important, just that it sets the tone for the video.
But yes, there are brand new collectors out here right now today that can't spot the difference between a basic fake and a real card. And I'm going to show some basic fakes on the screen. If you can't tell these cards are fake, this video is absolutely for you.
Well, yeah, never mind. He's very inclusive, very pokey positive. If you can't tell the difference between these fakes, if that fucking floppy golden card, if you obviously cannot tell that card is fake as hell, then this video is 100% for you, person who doesn't know anything about Pokemon card collecting whatsoever. Which is fine. That's perfectly acceptable. It's just cool. He's inclusive. I like it.
I'm going to share you guys some tips on today's video that will absolutely help you find some amazing deals down the line. I've used every single one of these tips to get amazing deals, cards that are half off or way cheaper, because I have some information on these cards that maybe the seller doesn't.
Half off of cards, holy hell, like I'm not even here. That is like a cheat code right there. That's just the infinite money glitch. That's just put it in big head mode in Ratchet and Clank or something. That's some crazy stuff going on right there. Half off of a card because of some information you may have that maybe someone else doesn't have. That's a little crazy. I wonder how that's going to even happen. Do you guys what are your guesses that's going to happen? How do you think he's going to get cards like up to half off? Maybe even a little bit more than half off. What do you think Twice Baked Jake's going to do, and what secret information could he possibly have in that big cranium of his? I'm not sure. Let's keep going. Wow, this sounds really pokey positive.
So let me share some information with you guys. The first one, and probably the most basic tip that you need to understand, is the difference between a first edition Pokemon card and a non-first edition Pokemon card. There are first edition cards mainly from the Wizard of the Coast era. When it comes to English cards, this is going to be the most common. There are Japanese cards that are first edition after the Wizard of the Coast era, but when it comes to vintage, cards with the first edition stamp are going to be more valuable than their non-first edition counterpart.
He's just spitting facts right now. I don't know what else to say. If you have one with first edition versus non-first edition, the first edition in English is going to be more valuable. Funnily enough, there is actually some unlimited versions of Japanese, like XY, black and white cards, stuff like that. They did still have first edition prints going for it. The unlimited is actually rarer typically in Japanese, and those ones typically do go for a bit more. There was an instance of somebody online who was looking specifically for unlimited versions of those Japanese cards, specifically full martial art trainers, and they were incredibly difficult for people to find because they're not as printed as much. They're just not something like that. So that is an active comparison on the Japanese side of the house, where it's not necessarily the same. And the Wizard of the Coast stuff like that, I do not believe I don't think it had any first edition shit like that. I really don't think it did up until like a certain point, like Black and White, XY. I know those ones did for sure, but can't think of anything past that.
A great example of the difference between the first edition stamp and the non-first edition stamp is going to be the Neo Lugia. An unlimited version of the Lugia, which is a non-first edition copy, will range around $100 for an ungraded copy, and a first edition version of the Neo Lugia will go for around $500. That's 5 times the value for a first edition version, and I have seen people price these cards incorrectly. It happens all the times at card shows, at garage sales, at game stores, where whoever is doing the pricing, they may be looking up TCG Player or market value of these cards on Card Market and picking the non-first edition version and pricing the Neo Lugia at $100, and that's a fantastic deal. So that little bit of information can go a long way. So that's our very first example.
So as you can see, this is where like the contradictions start to come into play. He's still pokey positive after all. This is nothing to be like, oh, super, let's not get our pitchforks yet, ladies and gentlemen. But it's kind of funny that this is a video where it's supposed to be information to collectors about, helping people out, giving them tips to expand their collection, maybe help them out with a little bit of value upon cards, where the active first tip is to take advantage of people not knowing information correctly or making mistakes when it comes to pricing. Is that your responsibility as a customer? No. What a store decides to do with their own cards is fine. It's up to them. They can do whatever the hell they want. They can sell whatever they want. But it is funny, and it is worth noting that the first tip is to actively take advantage of the lack of information that certain people in our hobby might have as a community. Take advantage of what people do not know by spreading this stuff. Like, here's information to you. Here's the first tip. Take advantage of what someone else doesn't know in our community or our hobby or something like that. Or maybe people logic it by saying like, oh, they're just like some store owner or garage sale. They're not in our hobby. It doesn't matter for any of that stuff. It's just funny because a lot of people in this community, they talk about helping the community by doing, and then like just say out loud, by the way, screw the community over by their lack of information. That's my first tip. Motherfucker didn't know the difference between a first edition or a non-first edition. There you go. It's just a weird thing to say out loud. We'll keep going. I'm sure it doesn't get worse.
The second example that I would like to use is look for cards that have recently spiked in value. Now, this is going to be the kind of knowledge that really gets you ahead of the game. For examples, we have cards that double or triple in value within the period of a week or two. If you look, for example, back in March and April, a card like the Umbreon V from Evolving Skies went from being a $50 card to a $200 card within the span of a week or two. If some places like an eBay store or a trading card shop still has the card price at $50, then fantastic. That's a great value deal for you. So a little bit of information can go a long way. If the seller doesn't know what they're selling, well, so be it. That's a good deal for you. This is a very competitive game, and if you think I'm being a little bit cutthroat, maybe if you want to be the nice guy to let them know and say, hey, you got a $50 card here, but it's really worth $200, you can be that person. I've done that for some people who I think can really learn something from that lesson as well. So it's going to be up to you, but it doesn't hurt for you to pick up that card.
It's funny. Jake coming off as like a tough guy is like a really funny thing. If you want to be the nice guy and tell them that you have this card that's actually worth $200 as opposed to $50, you be that nice guy, not me. I'm red-pilled Jakey and I'm not nice. I've done it for some people before, but you taking advantage of that. It's like, so be it. It doesn't hurt you to tell people, like, it's just weird, okay? Like, if he wants to do that, if he wants to take advantage of that to a degree, it's on the store, I suppose, but at the same time, it's really weird to just make a video actively, like, for the community, stating to fuck over the community. It's very weird to put it out there and just actively say it out loud. You remember in the beginning where he kind of was like, this is some of the things that collectors don't talk about? this is some unspoken things that just don't necessarily get brought up. You think that maybe people don't bring it up or they don't say that they do this shit because when you actually say it out loud, you put into a sentence, it sounds really douchey. Is that really something that maybe is possible? Maybe that's just a thought that people have in their head. They're like, huh, I'm kind of being a real tool. I'm kind of taking advantage of a situation that someone may have less knowledge about. Me, the experienced collector versus the virgin beginner over here. Like, it's very weird to just, and then like a whole nother factor on top of that is what if it's like a kid or something like that? What if it's like a kid helping out their parents by like selling out like cards or something like that, or working at a vendor or something? No, once again, it's not necessarily on you, but at the same time, telling an active following base to go take advantage of people's lack of information or lack of something while making videos helping the community is very strange, because you're actively telling one portion of the community to go fuck over another portion of the community, indirectly or not. You want to be the nice guy, you want to be the real last guy. That really, nice guys always finish last. Not me, twice Bakey Jakey. I take advantage of everything thrown at me, and it's very not very pokey positive of you. I'm gonna say that. I mean, if you don't care, fine, whatever. It's just an active thing that I saw on your video where it was a huge contradiction between what you're telling somebody versus what actually happens for the community, the whole point of the video. I don't know, it's just funny to me.
The next example is one that I've personally used all the time. This one happens all the time, and that is the difference between a holo card and a non-holo card. And this is, again, in the vintage era mainly, but in general, in the vintage era, there are non-holo and holo versions of a lot of different major chase cards, and the difference in value between the holo version and the non-holo version can be extremely dramatic. And I've seen many a times a holo Pokemon card from a very rare set, which is a chase pull, being priced as the non-holo counterpart. So this happens all the time, and I'm going to give you a great example, which is the Sky Ridge Umbreon. This card is absolutely gorgeous. The non-holo version of it, which is still a great rare Pokemon card to pick up from a Sky Ridge booster pack, is currently going for right around $100. But if you can find the holo version of the Umbreon from Sky Ridge, it is going for $750. That's a 700% price climb and difference between the holo version and the non-holo version of the same card from the exact same set. They look very similar, and it can be confusing. I see people price this card or cards similar to it incorrectly on eBay all the time. This happens all the time where they have a holo Umbreon and they accidentally price it for $100 when it's really worth like $500 or $600. This happens more often than you guys might think, and you can scoop it up for a fantastic deal if they don't know what they currently have in their hand.
Yeah, if they don't know what they currently have in their hands, you can take advantage. It's just weird to say out loud. It's a very strange thing to tell one section of the community to take advantage of the lack of knowledge of another portion of the communities, just to take advantage of it. It's very strange to do. Does it happen? Is it ultimately on the store? I'm sure, but it's one of those unspoken things where, like, yeah, you don't really talk about it because it sounds kind of crappy whenever you bring it up. It's crazy that, like, I really do think, and this, if this says anything about what goes on here, a lot of creators are going to be looking and hunting and stuff like that. There's always people that are trying to get the best deal as possible. By all means, get the best deal that you possibly can, but to take advantage of stuff like that, especially like the fucking reverse stamps versus like the just regular holos and some of those like older sets like Power Keepers or stuff like that, or the Dragons Exalted or Crystal Guardians or something like that, I guarantee like those get mispriced all the time too. And it does, how you decide to handle that situation can make a difference on how people look at certain things like that. For example, I'll give you an example that I have. So Japanese alternate arts at one point versus English alternate arts were a huge price difference, right? An example would be the Shadow Rider Calyrex VMAX. This is like it was like a $600 card, $500 card in Japanese whenever I was trying to get it from somebody. Someone had a Japanese one listed, and I went to try to go talk to them about it because they had it listed for like about $100 or something like that. And I was like, hey, what's wrong with this card? And they're like, what do you mean? And I was like, there's nothing wrong with this card? They're like, no. And I was like, well, it's weird because you're kind of pricing it at a weird amount. And they're like, oh, someone just bought it for like $100. And I explained to them that it was actually a $500 to $600 card. and they were like, oh snap, I had no idea or something like that. I didn't know the Japanese and English counterparts were going to be so crazy different. Took the time to explain that to them. They had already sold that card to somebody. They'd honored the deal, and basically were like, it's like, oh man, I had no idea. It's one of those things where instead of being like that, you can take a whole nother aspect to it, and you can actually tell people what's going on, especially if you yourself are not hurting for Pokemon cards. Yes, it's great to pick up deals. It's great to be like that, but at the same time, and this is coming from me, I'm an asshole here, remember? I'm just the worst motherfucker that's ever walked this place, and I have no problem telling people how stuff works without taking advantage of them. And it's one of those things where it's like where people value certain aspects of the community. It's where people value certain people here. I really don't feel great taking advantage of someone like that, especially if they don't know any better. And the education that you can provide someone, especially with dealing with other language cards, in my opinion, is far more valuable. It reeks more credibility, and honestly, like, it just feels good to educate somebody about something they have when maybe they thought they had something different. But I guess Twice Baked Jake doesn't necessarily view it that way. I mean, he even had like a nice little comment about something, which I absolutely do not agree with. The tips I was expecting: check your prices first, look out for popular Pokemon like Charizard, put cards in top loaders so they stay in good condition. So that's what they were expecting to get. Jake's tips: find people who don't know their values and take them for everything they're worth. Damn, Jake, and that's a pretty upvoted comment for this. To get a good deal, someone has to have a bad deal. That's absolutely... oh my god, that is absolutely not true, man. Like, for example, that Lugia, we'll use your Lugia for an example. It's worth $500 and they're selling it for $100. Be like, hey, just so you're aware, like, offer them a little bit more for it. Be like, hey, I'll give you like $200, $300 for that, okay? And they're like, why? And you explain to them why. I mean, I think, number one, they're more likely to take that deal. They're more likely to be, oh, I wasn't expecting to get this much money for it anyway. You taught them a lesson. They made a little extra money. You still got a card for a deal. Everybody fucking comes out on top. Are they free to decline that deal? Absolutely. You just gave them information. But at the same time, you don't walk throughout the rest of the day knowing you just took advantage of ignorance. You don't walk out throughout the day and be like, huh, that person didn't really know what was going on. Is it their fault for stepping into Pokemon and not doing enough research? Possibly. It's one of those things you could debate. But at the same time, you can offer up more than the card's worth if you know the card is worth more, while still not paying that top amount. Be like, hey, I'll offer you $250. I'll offer you $300 for this card instead of paying fucking $500. You still make a killer of a deal. You educated somebody, and the person gets a little bit more money than they thought they were going to. There is ways everybody can come out on top of that. I can't believe I'm the pokey positive person here. It's still crazy. It's a fresh new hat. It's something good. I guess I'm just Papa Smurf now. I don't know. I'm not really too sure, but it's all I got. Appreciate it, virgin. See you later. No hard feelings, Twice Baked Jake. It's just it's really weird coming from such a pokey positive person in the community to tell one section of the community to fuck over another portion of that community. It's